The long-awaited Black Widow solo movie finally makes the scene. But is it several days late and dollars short? Find out when Johnnie Torch reviews Black Widow. Well, welcome to another Johnnie Torch review. Been long waiting this Black Widow review. I seen it a few days ago, back on Wednesday. As of now, we're recording this on a Saturday, so apologies if I forget any pertinent information or make any mistakes, but very excited to do this review because we've been waiting for a Black Widow movie. Many of us who are fans of the Black Widow and what Scarlett Johansson was able to do with the character through her many appearances, particularly guest appearances in other people's movies, such as Captain America films and Iron Man 2. She finally gets a chance to shine in her own solo movie. But as I said, is it a day late and a dollar short? Of course, she also had to wait out the rough and rowdy 2020 movie season, which saw next to no blockbusters released. So where does that leave her now? Of course, this is also problematic in that the character, I suppose, this is a spoiler review, of course, but I'm pretty sure everyone has seen Endgame. The character has already been killed off, and this, of course, is a prequel sandwiched in between Civil War and I believe Infinity War. So again, this is a spoiler review. I will just try to make a brief overview of it, spoiler-free. And the overall feeling was, it was pretty good. I enjoyed it. Wasn't overly woke. It's kind of dark, which you kind of imagine it needed to be with the subject matter. But again, this is something I think maybe, well, probably what is considered a hard PG-13. I think you should probably really consider, if you're going to have preteens, you know, the younger than 13 crowd, watch it. And the action was pretty good. There's, you know, some complaints about some of the sort of Batman Begins style camera work where the action's a little bit too close quarters. I can see that. The cast is all very good. No complaints down the line. Of course, this was the big introduction of Florence Pugh as Yelena Belova, I believe her full name is. The new Black Widow, apparently. So, you know, as I said, high marks pretty much across the board. I do agree with most reviewers, which I don't read or listen to any reviews before I see a movie. I wait till after. I don't want it to color my opinion of the film. I do agree that a lot of people are saying the third act kind of unravels and gets unwieldy, and I'll get into that in the spoiler area. Kind of slow in some places, and also it's one of those things where I don't think it's slow in the sense that they could have cut out some scenes for better pacing, but if they had sort of, you know, perhaps truncated some of the scenes a little bit, maybe just remove 5 minutes out of 2 scenes, and I think the film would have probably flowed a little bit better. So again, a passing grade. You know, it's not top 10 Marvel caliber, in my opinion anyway. This is not the next top 5 film, and this is probably more on the higher end of the mid-level Marvel movies. This is probably, at least in my list, under Ant-Man and Doctor Strange. but probably above Black Panther and Infinity War, which were, to me, good movies, solid movies, but not great movies. And, of course, the lower end for me are the 2 Spider-Man films, Captain Marvel, Guardians 2, and definitely Endgame being one of my least favorites. All right, so let's get to the review proper. And, of course, spoiler warning, spoiler warning, spoiler warning. From here on out, you have no excuses if you do not want to be spoiled on The Black Widow. All right, so first off, let's talk about the timing of this film, because everybody knows, as I said before, this film should have come out back, I would say, immediately after the first Avengers in 2012. A solo movie with the Black Widow and supporting cast, including Hawkeye and Nick Fury. It was a must. It was a given. She was introduced perfectly in Iron Man 2. Still probably the most... it's tough. Iron Man 2 and the first Avengers is, I believe, the most accurate portrayal of the Black Widow. Natasha Romanoff as the Black Widow. The most accurate are those 2 films. They started with Age of Ultron to... It was a slow progression, I believe, to try to sort of just water her character down as just a competent fighter. They still had most of her character intact, I suppose, throughout the Captain America films. But as I've always said, and I've said this in countless Torch News Roundups, live streams that I do, that the reason why the Black Widow will never get a real comic accurate movie, and the reason why they waited so long on the Black Widow movie, is because you cannot market the Black Widow to little girls. The whole marketing push for Captain Marvel was, this is the hero your daughter is supposed to look up to. She is strong, she is confident, she is not sexualized. This is the hero the little girls need. Black Widow is the complete antithesis of that. She's the opposite of what they want to push as your daughter's favorite superhero. And they even have Yelena say this, some version of this in the movie, which I thought was very telling, where she says, you know, you're the Avenger that all the little girls look up to, even though you're a murderer, assassin, and temptress. Something to that effect. And basically, that's the reason why this movie wasn't made for so long. Because if it was to be made in 2012, and they go back to Budapest, and we tell the story of Hawkeye meeting her, and that whole prequel, you're going to have to show the Black Widow as an unrepentant killer, an assassin. You're going to have to show that she's a temptress, sort of what we saw in the opening scenes of Avengers, what she was low-key doing to Tony Stark in Iron Man 2. You had to show that side of the character, that she's not entirely altruistic, that she toys with men to get what she wants from them, that she will kill without regard, more or less, of who it is she's killing, the consequences of who she's killed. And that's a tough character to market to little girls and to try to show that this is who you're supposed to emulate. That was the big sticking problem. That was the Black Widow movie that we deserved as fans. Now, I'm not going to completely throw the baby out with the bathwater on this one, though, because while that is something that probably most fans wanted to see and was probably the most accurate incarnation of the character, what we get here is essentially an origin film. And it's an origin film after the fact. This is what Marvel does so well, the MCU does so well, is they are tying together all the threads that we learned from as far back as Avengers. The Dragoff's daughter, I hope I'm saying that name right, Dragoff, is that his name? Dragoff's daughter, and how that decision basically impacted sort of the demons coming home to roost, so to speak, for her here, and her desire to get the red out of her ledger. All of that comes to play in this one, so they don't forget that. They don't pretend like it didn't happen. I think this is a very dark film, and we'll get to that. You know, I'll try to go through it, you know, from scene to scene. I'm not going to try to make this too long a review, but we start at the beginning, where a strangely blue-haired, colored young Natasha is with her family. Of course, we find out that they are Russian plants, that this is her adoptive family, that they are basically just playing a ruse so that the parents of the two, Yelena and Natasha, can get whatever intel they're supposed to be getting for apparently the Russian government. It's kind of left ambiguous. And you're going to hear me say this a lot because there were a lot of plot holes in this one. And I'm not a nitpicker in the least. But for instance, if Hydra had infiltrated S.H.I.E.L.D. at this point, and I think the date they gave was 95 or 96, from what I remember, I'm pretty sure Hydra had completely taken over by that point. So were the Russian operatives going against Hydra by trying to escape from S.H.I.E.L.D.? I'm left somewhat confused. So we learn, of course, that the father in this case, Alexei, has some super soldier powers. We are never given any information about that beyond him lifting up an airplane or something to help get them away. It's kind of a lengthy scene. I thought that they kind of dragged it out a little too much, and it feeds right into the next scene where we see that Alexei sort of hands over the two girls to the Red Room, and the Red Room is, of course, run by Dragoff. And through the credits, we see sort of their indoctrination, the, you know, psychological traumas that they're going through, and the physical training. This was something that probably could have been a movie unto itself, but again, this is very, it's very dark stuff, and I can understand why they didn't go too much into that. So then we flash then forward to right after Civil War. General Ross, or excuse me, Secretary Ross, it'll always be General Ross to me, is trying to pursue Black Widow. She gives him the slip. And that opening scene there with the family trying to get away, that reminded me of The Amazing Spider-Man 2. And this is what I think a lot of this film feels like patchwork of other films that were not very successful. And it's interesting that they are drawing on films, with the exception of one, and I'll get to that later in the story. With the exception of one, I think all the patchwork stuff they borrowed from was from less than successful films. The beginning reminded me of Amazing Spider-Man 2, not a particularly good or effective film. The next portion reminded me of Elektra, and that was a film that was widely panned. I don't think it's as bad, to be totally honest with you, as a lot of people made it out to be. It's not a great movie. It is not upper tier, even pre-Marvel, pre-MCU. It's not upper tier pre-MCU. But it is a solid film, and I think that people kind of slept on it. But we have some similarities to that film here. We have sort of a, I don't know, simping handler like Elektra had in this guy. I don't remember what his name is. I'll call him Skip because he looks like a Skip to me. This British guy who sort of simps and gives Natasha everything she needs to get off the grid and survive in a isolated area somewhere. And he is sort of kind of makes the overture that he's, you know, romantically interested in her, but she won't have any of it. And it kind of, like I said, felt like something from the Elektra film. And the beginning of the film also does feel kind of like that, with Elektra in that movie spends literally the first 15 minutes after the introduction. She spends about 15 minutes just doing nothing and being bored and waiting for the movie proper to start. And I kind of feel that's something similar that happens with Natasha here. It's not on as bad a level, but I found it interesting. And also the sort of big sister, little sister storyline. Again, I don't want to really spoil Elektra if it's something you're interested in seeing, but that theme is also somewhat played out here. So the introduction to Yelena, I think Florence Pugh really stole the show here. I'm not going to go so far as to say that this was her movie. I know a lot of people, like I said, I've seen some reviews at this point that are saying, oh, it's just an introduction to Yelena's Black Widow, and ScarJo sort of the backup. No, I don't believe that at all. But I do believe she made a strong impression here. I think she gives a really strong performance. She's the one I think that is, she sort of ties the movie together emotionally. And I think, you know, she does steal the movie, but I don't think it's because the movie is focused on her too much. I think they give her sort of the right balance, so to speak, of the movie. So she's in a mission, and she kills some mark that they're after, and the victim releases this red cloud or whatever it is, this red gas that brings Yelena out of this sort of Kali Ma that she's under. You know, like Short Round had to use fire to sort of release Indiana Jones from the black sleep of Kali. Well, this red smoke is going to release all the Black Widows. And so she sends this red smoke to Natasha, who gets attacked by the Taskmaster. Now, we'll get into that a little bit later. And that is a pretty exciting scene. The Taskmaster is very impressive. He's imposing. He's this, he's that. What they do with him ultimately, of course, I think this is probably the worst kept secret, is pretty unforgivable. Now, we'll get back to that in a moment. But so Natasha ends up seeking out Yelena. She knows it's Yelena that sent her the package because she had the childhood photos there. And there's some kind of mistrust on their part for one another, which is kind of curious, but I'm not sure if that's warranted. But apparently Natasha didn't know that Yelena was still involved in the Red Room because Natasha believes that she already destroyed Dragoff. And then we get the flashback of the Dragoff's daughter incident that was talked about in Avengers. And apparently that Dragoff's daughter was some, I don't know what she was, 9 or 10-year-old kid that Natasha had it set up with S.H.I.E.L.D. to destroy the building that Dragoff was in. And the confirmation that Dragoff was in the building was that his daughter, his like 10-year-old daughter, was in there with him. So again, they don't really shy away from the fact that Natasha's done terrible things. I think a lot of people also are criticizing the film about, well, the Black Widows are brainwashed now, so that kind of nullifies that they did bad things. No, it's sort of a natural result of what's happened. Like when Natasha is the one being programmed, it's just psychological manipulation, you know, so to speak. And when she escapes that, and arguably some other women may have as well, well, naturally, they're going to try to progress to the next level. The next thing would be, of course, just total mind control. And I don't think that was too far off the reservation to think that's what would happen next. But I like the rapport of the sisters. You know, they didn't trust each other. They kind of come to each other's aid. And so they decide to liberate Alexei, who was, of course, the Red Guardian, David Harbour playing the Red Guardian. I think he was a really fun character. I really enjoyed seeing him, but of course he bears zero resemblance to the Red Guardian in the comics. Now they even had a joke where Yelena calls him the Crimson Dynamo, because honestly not too many people are going to really know too much about the Red Guardian. Now the Red Guardian is the communist version of Captain America. He's Russia's Captain America. He's a super soldier, has similar powers, and he was married to the Black Widow in the comics. This is completely different. He's sort of an adoptive father to the girls. Again, I don't really begrudge them using this character, but they really didn't need to call him the Red Guardian if they were going to do this, because honestly, his contributions as the Red Guardian were nil. He does next to nothing with his powers. The only reason why the Red Guardian thing is attached to the character is twofold. One, to get him in a goofy-looking costume because he's clearly overweight and out of his depth, and so it's a kind of a ha-ha moment that he's trying to be a superhero, or I guess a superhero in his point of view. And of course, there's a running joke that, you know, he fought Captain America in his prime, and does Captain America ever mention me? And, you know, the guys are like, the guys in prison are like, Captain America was still in ice when you were out free in the 80s, you know? It didn't happen, and he's sort of trying to cling to this image that he has of himself, if no one else. So they rescue him from prison, and this is one of the maybe two instances where the film could be seen as woke. Now, obviously, I've complained about this in the past with a lot of these Marvel movies. For instance, in Black Panther, Everett Ross really didn't need to be in that movie. He's really there for one purpose, to be the token white guy that is the butt of jokes. And it's the same thing here. This, you know, Alexei is basically the token white guy that is the butt of jokes. The jokes can be funny. They're hit and miss. We'll talk about that in a second. But he is not there really to be his own character. And that is kind of from the woke playbook. It's the same thing really as also, if you want to get off of, I mean, because we could say the same thing about Captain Marvel. There really wasn't, you know, we have Samuel L. Jackson, but he was taking a decided backseat to Captain Marvel. But I would probably compare this closer to Birds of Prey. And I didn't feel Birds of Prey was overly woke either. And a lot of people, to their credit, I think when they reviewed Birds of Prey, pointed that out. It's not overly woke. The problem is they don't have an altruistic male figure in the whole film. Everybody is out for themselves. The Black Mask, Zaz, even the Asian guy that owns the building or something that Harley was in. There's no altruistic guy. They're all out for themselves. And I suppose that's something like that here, but the only difference is I think that Alexei's more endearing. But as I said, it's not unbearably woke. I think that I can take this character better than Everett Ross, who was totally played as a fool. And he makes his presence known here as he's sort of trying to be a father figure where he really isn't equipped. They rescue him in the plane is a very awkward joke. I knew they were going to have to get back to this because we learned in Age of Ultron that the Black Widows and the Black Widow program, they all have forced hysterectomies, so they cannot have children. It makes things easier for the life of an assassin and a agent to not have that concern. And they bring it up again here to emphasize that Yelena had the same sad fate, but it's turned into a very uncomfortable joke. And again, it's not very much for children. I think this was kind of a touchy subject in Age of Ultron, but they've made it even more uncomfortable here. I think you'd have to probably have a interesting conversation with your kids if they're, you know, sort of under the age of 13 as to what that whole scene meant. There probably was a better way of addressing it without making it so awkward. But Marvel has the MCU has the habit of trying to make a joke out of the more darker elements. And I understand that, but there's a scene just a few scenes earlier than this where Yelena and Natasha are outside drinking, outside a bar or something, and Yelena asks, would you have liked to had kids? And Natasha doesn't answer this. This is an interesting thing that I noticed, that I kind of wish they would have actually had her answer it, because I almost expect her to say no. But I don't know if I'd believe her if she said no. But they leave it very ambiguous. And maybe that was the place to have Yelena remind people that neither of them can have children now. That became a very contentious subject with feminists coming after Joss Whedon, which, you know, I'm neither here to praise nor bury the man, but I don't think that was the intent of talking about it in Age of Ultron. So then we move on. So the Alexei has to, he doesn't know anything because of course he's a fool, and they have to find Melina. I'm not sure about any of their names, but Melina as well is a character from the comics known as the Iron Maiden. And of course, she doesn't wear a costume, anything like the Melina of the comics. But this is another character. Rachel Weisz plays her, or Rachel Weisz, as some people pronounce it. Again, I don't know. I'm going to say Weisz because I've always said Weisz, but apologies if it's the incorrect interpretation. I also found it interesting that they name drop Hawkeye a couple of times, and they actually have the discussion on at least they bring up why does Natasha say Budapest when pretty much everybody else says Budapest. She's the only one in this quote unquote family who doesn't have a Russian accent, but she sort of, her tongue becomes Russian when she says Budapest, and they kind of bring that up as a sort of, you know, just a sort of funny throwaway line. I think it's Budapest. No, it's Budapest. I thought that was pretty funny and a nice touch. But the character of Melina, again, this is where there's some kind of plot contrivance here where apparently Melina is still working for Dragoff, and she's still part of the Red Room program, and she's been through the Red Room process herself a number of times, but she's still working for Dragoff, and she sort of, they try to pull a twist here where you don't know where her allegiance is, and it's kind of hard to get a feeling on what side of the aisle does she fall on. Does she not want to be part of the Red Room? Why is she still part of the project? She's raising pigs, so she's sort of removed from it. Again, maybe this is, I need to see the film a second time to try to get this, at least in my own head, to make sense. But she sort of doesn't want to bring down the Red Room and Dragoff, but then again, on the other hand, she sort of wants to because it's the right thing to do. And this leads to like another long scene. First, there's this like abnormally long scene where she's trying to explain the mind control. It's just sort of plot exposition / psychobabble, where she's sort of choking a pig out by telling him not to breathe. And it's very uncomfortable because you're more concentrating on, well, gee, is the pig going to die because we're waiting for her to let him breathe again? But she just sort of has to go through this plot exposition first. And once the pig's situation is out of the way, then we get to the other lengthy scene, which is sort of the round the table scene for the family. Now, this was done very well, and I don't think anybody would disagree with that. I do feel like that it was kind of long. But the main gist of it is that these four people are a family, whether they choose to be or not. They sort of slip back into those roles of being a family. And they might not have ever wanted this, but getting back into those roles is tough to shake. And Yelena, and it feels very natural, her reaction to all this. She's the baby of the family. She was 6 years old when all this stuff started happening. And she wants this to be real. And she has several, you know, arguments between her and Natasha and the rest of the family, in that she's the only one that sort of bought into this image that they were a family and that they were supposed to be together and solve problems like a family does. Where Natasha's more, you know, she's not under the illusion. So I think this does lead to one of the, like I said, one of the more endearing things with Alexei. He sort of tries to patch things up sort of between he and Yelena. It's a very touching scene. Again, it's kind of played for laughs, but it does feel like it's something natural that you'd believe is going on between these characters. It's done pretty well, I believe. So getting into the third act now, this is where things kind of get off the rails. Now, we had a few decent action scenes. Like I said, the action's not bad. I think the action was very good. Some people complained about the shooting of it, the camera angles and the so forth, but I think the action was pretty good. It was just very unevenly paced. It's like there's an action scene, there's a long stretch. There's like maybe 2 short action scenes, there's a long stretch. Something like that probably could have been, like I said, paced a little bit better. So, the final act, we have Melina. She sort of rats on the family and has them all captured by Dragov's men, the Black Widows. Now, this in an attempt to be somewhat clever, it turns out that Melina traded places with Natasha. So it's actually Natasha in the office with Dragov, while Melina is in the prison, and because she knows how to escape, because she designed it, she escapes with Alexei. And they sort of vis-a-vis rescue Yelena by telling her how to get out, because she's, for some reason, going to get a lobotomy. Again, there's a lot of questions that I had with this film that I honestly didn't have any answer to. That was one of them. Why do they want to sort of take her brain apart when, I don't know, what is it? Once they get that programming and the red smoke takes it away, they can't just reprogram her with whatever chemicals or biological implants they had. Whatever it is, they can't do it. They need to give her a lobotomy. All right. So this is the big reveal of the taskmaster, who, of course, turns out to be Dragov's daughter. She has sort of that two-faced look because, sort of like Harry Osborn at the end of Spider-Man 3, she got half of her face blown off. Again, how did she survive as a 10-year-old or whatever while Dragov escaped unscathed from a completely exploded building? I don't know. The movie doesn't explain it. It goes out of its way to not even address how Dragov escaped this, let alone escaped unscathed. Olga Kryenko, I believe, plays her taskmistress, Dragov's daughter, who, of course, was in Quantum of Solace, one of the lesser Daniel Craig Bond films, which I saw it. I mean, I'm not a Bond aficionado by any means. I thought it was okay, but I think this is sort of her only other appearance in some kind of genre film that people would know. And so she's all scarred up, and this is the part that reminded me of X2. Sort of the, you know, Stryker basically hated mutants, and his son is a mutant, and he used his son basically to bring about the enslavement of other mutants. And that was a powerful thing. X2 is still, in my opinion, the best X-Men movie, X-Men United. And it's still on my top 10, I think, to this day, regardless of the many, many superhero flicks that have come out since X2 came out. We have sort of a similar parallel here, where Dragoff is using his daughter. She's not even human anymore. He basically uses her as a huge enforcer robot, where she sort of has data plugged into her neck where she can learn the moves of other heroes, such as we see Captain America, Black Panther. It would have been nice to see her wield a hammer like Thor at some point, just for the sake of completion. But again, we'll get into this in a second, but about the abuse of this character, the character name, and the treatment of it. But Dragoff is not as strong a villain as Stryker. I don't know if it's Ray Winstone, who plays Dragoff, is not as strong a character actor the way Brian Cox was, but the theme is still there. The theme is that he is, you know, a misogynist. He doesn't care for women. They're unnecessary to him or whatever. And basically, if he can enslave women and use them for his own purposes and to build up this great empire or whatever that he's built for himself in the sky with this huge floating fortress, he's going to do it off the backs of women that he cares nothing about. And this is possibly the only other woke or overtly woke messaging in the film, where he says something along the line to Natasha that he uses the most underappreciated resource in the world that nobody needs or cares about, which is girls, young women. And again, it's kind of a woke messaging there. But again, we're talking about a villain. It's basically a one-line throwaway explanation on what he's doing. And again, if you want to make that a problem, you want to sit back and be like, oh, this is what this is all about. This is what you can do that. You can. I don't think it's enough to bring down the movie. I think there are a lot of times that a lot of these reviewers, and I'm not even going to mention any names, where they sit back and they just wait. Aha, a gotcha moment. This is where this all unravels because he said this. You know, they could have done it in a less ham-fisted way with that line. But apart from that, the messaging, it still resonated. You kind of get the idea, as I said, that this is another situation like Stryker. He sort of loathes this particular segment of society and is going to use and abuse them for his own ends. It's a strong message. If, like I said, if they communicated it a little differently, maybe you wouldn't have that sort of gotcha moment for the clickbaiters and so forth. So, Taskmaster, let's take a moment just to pick apart this character. All right, the Taskmaster in the comics was always a favorite. I always said that he should have been in an Avengers movie. They never wanted to make a sort of Legion of Villains or whatever the Injustice League equivalent for Marvel is. I'm forgetting right now what they're called. But had they done that, that would have been a perfect adversary for the Avengers, because he can literally mimic each character and fight each character on each character's merits. I know a lot of people wanted Taskmaster to fight Melinda May in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I said, that's a waste. You don't want to do that. He'll take on a full roster of Avengers and embarrass them. Why do you want to waste him on Melinda May? Same thing here. Basically, it's good in a way that they use him against Natasha, because Natasha knows all her comrades and knows how they all fight. And she's in essence, having to fight all her comrades in this one character. So I get it. But again, it's sort of, it smacks of, they don't want Natasha to lose to a man. That's kind of what it feels like. That might be, again, another woke element of the film. But I think basically what they were trying to do was trying to tie it back to Dragov's daughter in order for her to have the all-important forgiveness message. Now, I am not against that in the slightest. A lot of people are like, oh, we have to absolve Natasha of her crimes. She has a chance because she's a good guy now. Let's face it. To her, killing Dragov's daughter was collateral damage. She didn't care as long as she was getting rid of Dragov, getting rid of the Red Room. She's grown as a person. That is something we should all aspire to. So the fact that she wants to apologize to Dragov's daughter is not a bad thing. Now, again, let me put a pin in the Taskmaster conversation, but Taskmaster, of course, I think they probably figured a lot of people don't know him. A lot of normies didn't really know. They heard of him maybe, but that was it. And nobody was going to care. Of course, they should know by now that there's always going to be a large contingent of fans who are caring about how these characters are treated. And of course, Taskmaster is pretty much up there. He's not like some low level, I don't think, that you could just kind of wipe aside his whole, it's, you know, like I said, Red Guardian, you're probably going to get away with it with most fans. Taskmaster is a little bit, he's not a D-lister, let's face it. If anything, maybe he's a B-lister. I don't think I would even give him C-list status, because I knew Taskmaster from the comics since I was 4 years old. I mean, anybody who's read an Avengers comic, watched an Avengers cartoon, or even played the Spider-Man video game knows the Taskmaster. They know that he's an intelligent guy. He's a man. And to sort of just make him this robot heavy that they wanted to plant Dragov's daughter into, they could have used any other character. They just used the name recognition, the brand recognition of, you know, Taskmaster to sort of plug in a gap, and it's very lazy. And at this point, it's unacceptable. It really is. It's unacceptable. They don't need to do that because we've done so well with the MCU up to now, really, that this is going back to sort of like 90s era where you got a character, take the name, that's the character, make them look a little bit like it, and that's it. We'll just move on. We're not there anymore. We're respecting the fans, or respecting the source material. You can't just stick Dragov's daughter on the Taskmaster uniform and just let it go. All right, so that's the Taskmaster rant over. That was probably my least favorite aspect of the film, is what they did to Taskmaster. And a lot of people are like, well, they could always introduce the real Taskmaster. You know, don't even start with that. It's hard enough to really get the actual Mandarin into the MCU, and we're getting that allegedly with the 10 Rings, Shang-Chi and the 10 Rings, which that review will be coming up, you know, in a few weeks when that movie comes out, because I'm looking forward to that one too, like I was looking forward to this one. But Taskmaster is a little bit different. It's not really like a mantle. You could always say that the what's his name? The Killian was trying to take the mantle of the Mandarin, and there really was a Mandarin. You can get out of that. I don't know how you can get out of Taskmaster, a man having the same powers, a similar costume, the same abilities, and saying, well, he was the actual Taskmaster, while the mantle somehow fell to, you know, Dragov's daughter. I don't know. All right, so let's wrap up the last act. This, to me, was probably the most ridiculous aspect of the film. Now, Dragov, he sees through her disguise, and of course, as I said, she was disguised as Melina, and she has the same veil technology, or whatever it is, from the Winter Soldier film, where she just has some kind of a cloth thing over her face, and it just makes her look like someone else. He sees through that. And he sends Taskmistress off to kill Yelena and Alexei and Melina. I keep saying Maliva, but, you know, Maliva is from the Wolfman, I guess. But, so this leaves him vulnerable to an attack by the Black Widow. Now, another thing that they threw in that, I don't know if it was for good or bad, but Natasha apparently was told that her mother abandoned her and didn't ever seek after her or whatever, or find out what happened to her. And Melina sets her right about this and said, no, your mother's family was paid off, but she did try to find you and set things right, and Dragoff killed her. So before she wants to kill Dragoff, she's going to try to confront him with this information, and it literally goes nowhere. He doesn't give up anything other than she was buried in an unmarked grave, and she was killed, of course, for trying to rescue Natasha. So we never really have any closure on that. And again, that I don't think that would be an issue if Natasha doesn't die in this film. I mean, in the next film, excuse me. But I mean, if this was the last film, you kind of feel like you want everything resolved. At least I would. I kind of felt like that was left on the table, and that there's probably never going to be any resolution to that now, which I think is disappointing. But some people also complain that there's no stakes because we know that Natasha doesn't die until the next movie. I don't have a problem with prequels. I don't have a problem with knowing that the hero is going to get out alive, because 99.9% of the time the hero is going to get out alive. The 0.1% that doesn't get out alive, usually it's no good. It's usually a contrived thing, and they sort of want to bid farewell to the actor. I don't know. So, trying to attack Dragoff, she tries to shoot him, tries to stab him. She can't do it, and it's because he's secreting a pheromone that, for some reason, when breathed in, it's a fail-safe so that none of the women can turn on him. They can't kill him. Again, this, I suppose I can buy this, that it sounds like a ridiculous... At face value, it sounds ridiculous. You smell him, and so you can't kill him. But, all right, at face value, I'll buy it. It's part of the mind control thing. You breathe in this pheromone, you can't kill him. Okay. So what does Black Widow do? And I know she's intelligent. I know she must have some kind of plan. Her plan is basically to goad Dragoff and have him beat her senseless. And so he's like punching her in the face multiple times. This doesn't sound like the greatest plan, especially from what we've learned about her, that she's like a master tactician. She knew how to play Loki. She knows how to play. She knew how to play Tony Stark, Bruce Banner. The master tactician here. So we're not taking any of that away from her. We know that coming in. But her plan is basically to get punched in the face multiple times, hope that she can shake it off, and hope that Dragoff breaks her nose so that she can't breathe in the pheromone. And, of course, this is also kind of, a lot of people, I can dispense with disbelief to a point. And I don't mind saying I can expect, whatever she is, 120-pound Scarlett Johansson taking a punch from 230-pound Ray Winstone. Okay, maybe I can suspend belief enough that she can take these flush on the face punches from a 200-pound man. All right, I'll accept that. That doesn't even break her nose, and so she has to literally slam her face on a desk to break her nose so that she can't breathe in the pheromone, and then, of course, he's vulnerable to her attack. I'm just kind of speechless at this. I don't know. To me, it just came off almost comical. At the very least, it comes off weak. At best, it comes off weak. At least, at the worst, it comes off comical. And again, I'll have to suspend disbelief enough to think that she can take all this kind of abuse to her face and still, be cognizant and be able to handle what's going on around her. That wasn't the scene that people seemed to take umbrage at. Yelena stops him from getting away by thrusting some kind of spear. Again, I don't remember exactly how this happens, into his hello jet or whatever the heck it is, and it causes it to explode, apparently killing him because we see his glasses go off. So Yelena ends up killing Dragoff, which I guess, I guess that kind of keeps Widow from getting red on her hands again. Maybe that's the reason why she's the one allowed to give the death blow. Of course, we also have the rest of the Black Widows. Yelena's mission, basically, she was charged with bringing them all out of the black sleep of Kali with the red smoke. She can't find them because they're all summoned to the office where Dragoff escapes before he's ultimately killed by Yelena. And all 20 or 30 Black Widows are basically beating up Natasha, giving her a slow and painful death, which, again, she sort of just shakes off. And she sort of resets her nose, and she's fine after all this. But Yelena, again, saves the day by setting off the smoke bombs in the office. And so, again, Yelena gets to shine a lot here. They are setting her up, but ultimately the big finish also has to do with Black Widow diving off this falling air fortress that Melina, I guess, sort of inadvertently destroyed. I don't remember how they both escaped. And her and Alexei. But they escape. Yelena's falling, and Black Widow has to race down and put a parachute on her and save her life while she continues to fall with Taskmaster right behind. Which, by the way, of course, again, to show how much the character has grown, Natasha goes back to save Taskmaster, who was locked in a cell. Again, this I don't think that's a bad thing to show, because, again, this is sort of where, Jason was in X2. He was basically used. And, I think it speaks well of her that she is trying to redeem this character. So they both fall. I don't exactly remember how they survive, which, like I said, I said when I seen the trailer, this is going to really come off bad if you remember that Black Widow died from falling off a very steep precipice, and so now we're having her dive literally from the clouds to the ground and survive. It kind of smacks of why did she have to be killed. I still don't understand that, but we'll leave that discussion for another time. Taskmaster also survives, Taskmistress, I suppose, and there's sort of one vial left. There's that one vial left of that red smoke, and she frees Taskmistress from the black sleep of Kali, and she basically, her only words are, "Is he gone?" Because, of course, she's basically a victim of Dragoff as well. And thus ends, basically, the Black Widow movie. There's a little more. We'll get to that in a second. But this, again, was sort of a very scattershot ending. Now, this reminded me of Wolverine Origins, where sort of you have this big cataclysmic ending. Oh, and, Wolverine is diving down the huge funnel-shaped thingamabob, and he lands on the ground, and he has, like, this last dealing with his enemy and his last dealing with his friends, and there's basically, like, a non-ending here. There's basically, like, Natasha basically tells Yelena, go and free the other girls that are still in the Black Widow program around the country. That's apparently this huge undertaking that she's going to have to do now during the 5 years, I guess, of the blip. And I guess possibly Red Guardian and Iron Maiden are going to go with her on this tour, this escapade. And again, the cavalry comes. Apparently, it's Secretary Ross. I don't know exactly what happens. It kind of doesn't make sense to me. She acts like she's going to go back and help out her fellow Avengers. How she does that, I don't know. I mean, the movie sort of just ends, and we skip a couple of weeks ahead where she's got the blonde short hairdo, and she's with Skip, whatever his name is, the travel agent guy, whatever, who somehow managed to procure sort of an Avengers jet so that she can, you know, meet up with Captain America and begin the Infinity War film. So I think I pretty much touched on everything here. So time for the final analysis. Well, let's talk about, I guess, the after credit scene. We'll tie that up first. The after credit scene, of course, is Yelena going to the grave of Natasha. So if you were showing these to anybody in order and you were gonna put this after Civil War, you pretty much either piqued their interest or ruined any suspense there would be for Endgame. But Julia Louis-Dreyfus shows up while she's at the grave. Now, a lot of people are saying this is Madam Hydra. God, I hope not. But apparently they know this from, I don't know what, maybe the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. I still haven't seen those shows. I hopefully will get to them at some point during the summer. And she gives her like a dossier or something and says, would you like to go after the man that killed your sister? And of course, it happens to be Hawkeye. And that's a very imbalanced, you know, view of what actually happened. But I find this interesting. Now, a lot of people also kind of, I think, are, oh, this is just, you know, they're going to blame Hawkeye. I can easily see them, or someone, I don't know who, if this is Madam Hydra, I guess Hydra, trying to manipulate what would be a very powerful asset in Yelena the Black Widow and having her go after Hawkeye and trying to get him off the table, seeing as now they already have pretty much 90% of the Avengers off the table. He's basically the only one left, right? I mean, we got Thor. He's out there cruising the cosmos. Nobody really knows when he's going to come back. Hulk has been completely nerfed. Iron Man's dead. Widow's dead. Captain America is ancient at this point. You know, he could be dead for all we know now after maybe a year or two in the MCU. There's very little left to go after in the original Avengers. This could be an interesting story. Now, this might play out in the Hawkeye TV show, which probably will, but I think this would make a pretty good movie if they actually would sort of build it up into Hawkeye the movie. Maybe you could have him have an actual movie of his own, but basically they're going to do Kate Bishop on the show. They're going to have him hand the torch, pass the baton, whatever. And that's where you're going to find that. All right, so, yeah, in the final analysis, again, I would give this film... I'm feeling kind of generous right now, and I'm going to say a 4. It could easily be maybe a 3.5. 3.5, 4 is kind of where I'm going with this. That's why I kind of like doing the alphabet barometer a little bit better, because you can be a little bit more, you know, playing with pluses and minuses. In other words, I would say this is maybe a B-. It's a B film in the MCU oeuvre. Is it a strong B or a weak B? I would say a weaker B. But it is still not a C. It is still not a mediocre to bad. I think it's above average, but still in that average area. I don't think it's in the top 10. I don't think it makes its way too far up the teens. It's probably, how many Marvel movies are there out now? 20, 22, something like that. It's probably somewhere in the mid-teens. And again, final thoughts about the future. Apparently, Scarlett Johansson has said she thinks this is probably it for her as the Black Widow. She, I think, probably has a few more passes at the character if she wants it. I think she'd probably be able to do a few more things, but I don't know that they want to bring her back from the dead. I'm saying there probably is more to tell if they want to delve into another prequel like this. We could see some more. The way they left the film, it seems like it's jumping straight into Infinity War. So I guess they'd have to, sort of massage the timeline a little bit to fit another adventure in. Or, of course, they could go way further back, which I don't think they're going to do for the reasons I've already described. All right, so let me know what you think of the Black Widow movie. Thumbs up, thumbs down. What do you think about the Black Widow character going forward? Do you think this is it for Scarlett Johansson? Do you think she'll show up again at some point? Maybe in sort of a huge Avengers project at some point. I'm thinking maybe Secret Wars will bring back all the original actors for maybe one more go if they choose to do that as a movie. Or what do you think of Florence Pugh going forward as the new Black Widow? She's apparently going to get a bigger role going forward. And, apparently she's going to show up in Hawkeye's TV show. I don't know if that's been confirmed, but they've got a lot of these things in the works. So she could show up conceivably anywhere. And, let me know what you think in the comments below. Thank you for joining us here on the only way to spend your Saturday, if you're watching this on the day it's released. And, again, I'm looking forward to what they do. It's very difficult because the MCU, like I said, all their heavy hitters are pretty much down now. We've only got a few left. Of course, we would have had a potential Black Panther trilogy. The unfortunate passing of Chadwick Boseman. We've got Doctor Strange for a couple more films, possibly more to come from Spider-Man. I don't know. That's kind of all up in the air now, too. Where does the MCU go from here? What are your thoughts about that? I'd really like to know, because we're going to be kind of on the third stringers pretty soon. All right, so until next we meet, this is Johnny Torch reminding you once again, keep the flame burning brightly, and I'll be with you again real soon.